Since I became involved in politics, and particularly since I went to live in rural Ireland, having grown up in a city where water, street lights, street pavements, sewage and all these services were taken for granted, it always surprised me that fundamental basic services are seen as too expensive and unaffordable for rural people. Now, I believe there are 4 services that should be in every house in the country. The first one is electricity, and thankfully we have achieved that. And we achieved that at a time that this country was relatively poor and where it was much slower and more difficult to provide fundamental infrastructure. Broadband, we're going to put fibre into every premise in the country. A brave decision, one that I disagreed with my own party's policy on, and I absolutely supported what the government of the time did in saying broadband to every premises, fibre broadband, don't shilly-shally, do the right job. The next one is nearly complete, a road to every house, a decent, travelable road. We don't need motorways, but we need a road with a decent surface. That is done in most places, and the remaining places have been done under the LIS scheme. Not an ideal scheme, but at least they're getting done. And then we come to water. That fundamental thing that everybody needs, clean, as they call it in the jargon, potable drinking water. And for some reason, there's a lacuna here, and the system keeps balking at providing the 10% of houses that don't have public water supplies or a group scheme connected to their premises. Now, there's a lot of talk about a referendum on water. And I presume that when people talk of a referendum on water, they are talking about the right of every household in the country to clean drinking water, and that would be central to this referendum. Now, as I said, it's only 10% of houses that don't have this. And when we look at the spend, and you might have the spend there, on water and wastewater in this country, it's about 2 billion. The vast majority of that, of course, goes into wastewater, which only serves 70% of the people. But time and again, and I have a great answer here, and it's full of jargon, of a previous question I raised, time and again we're told it's not economically possible. Basic services are very rarely economic in the economist's view of the world. They're choices for society. And basically what I'm suggesting here today is that the government would make a decision that every house in the country would have those 4 fundamentals: water, electricity, broadband and a road. And if we could say we had achieved that, and this is 2023, I think we'd have done something very basic in this country. Good market. The government's vision for water services, whether publicly supplied by Uisce Éireann or otherwise delivered under the Rural Water Programme, is set out in the Water Services Policy Statement 2018 to 25 and is based on the delivery and development of water services in line with the need and expectations of citizens and users, in compliance with legal obligations, in a fair and cost-effective manner, and in keeping with the principles of social, economic and environmental sustainability. We continue as a government to upgrade our investment in water services infrastructure in keeping with our EU drinking water and wastewater services obligations and in line with the population growth and economic development needs in both urban and rural areas. Factors such as distance and geography mean that connection to public water system operated by Uisce Éireann is unlikely to be a technically feasible or economically viable solution for all households and businesses in the state. It is precisely because of this viability challenge that the government necessarily supports a diverse range of measures under the Rural Water Programme to address water services needs of rural households and communities where connection to the public networks managed by Uisce Éireann is not possible.
Some 6% of people have their drinking water supplied by either public or private group schemes. Public group water schemes are group schemes that are supplied with treated drinking water in bulk by Uisce Éireann, whereas private group water schemes abstract, treat and distribute drinking water to their members. The private group water schemes are generally cooperative groups. They're wonderful groups right around the country. A further 10% of the people get their drinking water from private wells. In relation to wastewater services, census data indicates that approximately 1/3 of households rely on individual, group or other wastewater treatment arrangements. Apart from the economic cost of connection, it should also be clear from the arrangements I've outlined that many of the facilities in place, although supported by significant and growing state investment and support, and rightly so, are not in public ownership. The state approach in such situations is to work collaboratively and supportively as possible with the communities involved, while respecting local community expectations and cooperative ownership arrangements. It would be erroneous to assume that connection to a public water network would be a universal choice adopted by all citizens and communities. Arrangements for connection of existing group water and wastewater schemes to Uisce Éireann is of course possible and proactively encouraged where such an arrangement is technically feasible and economically viable. Clearly, however, the Exchequer support provided through the Rural Water Programme will continue to be necessary to deliver improvements to the quality, reliability and efficiency of private water services in areas of rural Ireland where there is no access to pipe water services. As the Deputy will appreciate, the Government is strongly committed to fair and balanced development for urban and rural communities alike. Our Rural Future, Rural Development Policy 21 to 25, presents the Government's blueprint and policy measures for recovery and development of rural Ireland for the period from 2021 to 25. The policy document identifies deficits in water and wastewater infrastructure, in particular a challenge to the development of many rural towns and villages, and state that this issue needs to be addressed to revitalise rural towns and villages. This matter raised before, therefore, is a priority for Government, and good progress is being made through combined efforts of our local authorities, working in conjunction with household and businesses at community level where appropriate. Uisce Éireann. The National Development Plan includes an allocation of €175 million over the period 21 to 25 for investment in rural water infrastructure under the Rural Water Programme. My department is currently finalising work on the review of the rural water sector, which is considering issues such as governance, supervision and monitoring, along with the wider investment needs of the sector to be provided under the ongoing multi-annual Rural Water Programme. The aim of the review is to recommend actions now and into the future to ensure equality of outcomes for those serviced by Uisce Éireann or supported under the Rural Water Programme. I'll come back in just on a supplementary then in response.
Minister, I didn't get a copy of the speech, but what you actually said was that the Water Services Policy 2018-2025 is based on the delivery and development of water service in line with the needs and expectations of citizens and users, in compliance with the legal obligations in a fair and cost-effective manner, and in keeping with the principles of social, economic and environmental sustainability. And I've been reading this again and again, and I've been trying to decipher it into simple, understandable terms. Does it mean, or does it not mean, that every house in the country should have access to drinking water? Clean, treated, tested drinking water. And if it doesn't, the policy is flawed. It's amazing we can put fibre in and we can't put water in. And I hear this argument about the economics of doing this, but unfortunately we have a working model that proves the economics aren't anything like they're making them out to be. I invite you, Minister, to come down to that area between Clonbar and the far end of the Man Valley, including places like Glantreig, a valley, a dead-end valley, Cremlin Valley, Doras, and all these peninsulas and valleys that we have in that area. It is as scattered a rural community as you will find. And under the CLAR programme, with a very modest top-up, the grant at the time was 5,000. We charged the householders about 500. That was 5,500. With a very modest top-up, we were able to bring water to virtually every house. I think there was 2 houses we missed, one because they wouldn't take it, and the other one was a bit over the mountain for the way we were costing the schemes. The whole area was done. It is as scattered as it's possible to find in the country. And it's a once-off cost. And running or maintaining good, well-laid water schemes is very, very cheap after that. We now in our area, thankfully, have, through those group schemes we put in, they were all connected to the public main. We now have one of the best quality water systems in the country, with very, very little maintenance, because it was all put up into standard and new. And therefore, Minister, I can absolutely demolish, and your own department, if they go to the Department of Rural Development, can absolutely demolish the theory that's not affordable. The second thing is, and I've argued this with your colleague, the Minister for Rural Development, the Clore scheme had a very efficient scheme for doing exactly what I want done, in conjunction with the department responsible for water. And it was delivering until the government of 2011 abolished it. It was delivering water in all of these areas. And a good section had been done. So the economic argument is blown absolutely out of the water. You have the Rural Regeneration and Development Fund. And there are all sorts of fancy things being done on that. But none of them are as fundamental as the right to water. And the right to water is coming on the agenda. And when that happens, the 10%, which is 200,000 houses, give or take, they'll be marching and demanding that they have a right to clean, tested, treated water as much as anybody else.
Margaret, and again, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Deputy. I think that right of everyone to have clean, potable drinking water is a fundamental right. And certainly, I mentioned the Federation of Group Water Schemes in my opening, and they're an organisation to be greatly admired. They have delivered very high quality water and work on environmental and other biodiversity initiatives right around the country. So they're really an exemplar of how to deliver water into remote rural areas. Our government is committed to supporting the Federation's work right across the country. Of course, we work and fund Uisce Éireann to carry out and deliver water into rural towns and villages as well, and encourage as many communities as possible to connect into water schemes, so I think that's a given. But I note too that the point that there are many households for which either private group water schemes or the option to connect into other schemes is not there. And I think it's critically important that those communities, people living in those areas, are able to access clean drinking water through recognised systems and wells. A lot of them are delivering their water through private wells, so that's to be accepted. It is not possible to reach all areas across the country.